Well, the government's claiming that a scheme to help people with disabilities into work has proved a big success here in the East Midlands, with more than 40,000 people finding work here in the last 12 months. But do its figures really add up? And what's it like for people with disabilities trying to find work? Here's Jane Dodge.
Set up to aid disabled men, the Remploy factories teach new jobs. Men who otherwise would be forced to remain idle are now able to work.
The language might make us cringe these days, but the aim hasn't changed, giving people with disabilities the chance of employment. Back in the 1940s, the government offered disabled miners and war veterans jobs in segregated workplaces.
This and other factories in the Remploy group are all part of a non-profit-making organisation.
But the factories proved too much of a strain on the public purse, and the last one closed in 2013. Now the current government talks of inclusion. Charlie Partington is an example of that.
It's going well. I've just linked the hyperlink from the case study to an external file.
He's just got a job as a sales and marketing trainee for the energy company E.ON at their offices in Annesley in Nottinghamshire.
I'd hate to think I was here just because I'm disabled. I'm here because I'm the right person for the job. I went through a recruitment process and I came out on top, and I'd hate to think that I was employed just because I had a disability.
According to the government, an extra 42,500 disabled people in the East Midlands are now in work compared to 2013. And that, we're told, is thanks in part to a campaign called Disability Confident, launched by the Prime Minister last year. This city centre cafe is run by Nottingham Mencap. It offers training and work experience for those people with learning difficulties. Just the sort of place that would know all about the government's campaign. Or so you'd think. Have you heard about the government's Disability Confident campaign?
I've not heard of it.
What's your reaction then to the news that they say an extra 42,500 disabled people are now in work?
Really? Where? I mean, that's great if it's true, but I'd worry about where the numbers have come from. Have the numbers been massaged? Because I haven't personally seen much evidence from my side.
And it's not hard to find volunteers here who would jump at the chance of getting a job. What do you do here?
I work in the cafe, I serve customers, I use the till, and I love cashing up.
Would you like to do it as a job and get paid for it?
If I could get paid for it, yes, I would.
The factories may have closed, but Remploy is still alive and kicking. It's had recent successes persuading big employers like M&S and Asda to take on more people with disabilities. Now the focus is on smaller businesses to do the same.
I think more and more attitudes have changed in regards that employers are starting to see the real business benefits of working with disabled people.
Which is what?
That's access to a workforce that is enthusiastic, is loyal, and has absolutely the right skills for them to do a great job.
Back at the Tea Trolley Cafe in Nottingham, Anne Warburton is busy serving customers. She's been helping out here for 4 years. Getting a paid job has proved very hard, but she's not giving up.
Oh, it would make me more independent, and I love it, I would, yeah.
50% of disabled people remain unemployed, far higher than the rate for able-bodied adults. Attitudes might be changing, but there's still a long way to go.
Jane Dodge reporting there. Well, Mark Harper is the Minister for Disabled People, and we asked him about those figures, claiming that 42,000 people in the East Midlands with disabilities have found work in the last year. Can they really be true?
The percentage of disabled people working full-time in the East Midlands has actually gone up, not down. More disabled people are now in work. We're making sure schemes like Access to Work, which is a government scheme that helps deal with the extra costs of disabled people going into employment, where those over and above reasonable adjustments. That's now, we're spending an extra £15 million on that. We're helping an extra 5,000 people each year. What we want to do is get to the point where eventually there isn't a gap between the percentage of disabled people in work and the percentage of non-disabled people in work. That's the ultimate goal, to make sure it isn't less likely that you'll be working if you have a disability.
Well, that's Mark Harper, the Minister for Disabled People, and Francis Ryan, who's a political commentator and journalist based at the University of Nottingham, was listening to that. Francis, what do you make of these government figures? 42,000 jobs sound brilliant.
The headline certainly sounds very optimistic. I think we certainly need to look a bit closer at the figures before we get too excited. I'd like to know how many of these are full-time positions or how many are on 0-hour contracts. Are they all paying the living wage? Have disabled people being coerced into any of these jobs based on something like a benefit sanction, which we know is a very common practice now. I think also before we celebrate the number of disabled people going into employment, it's worth noting that at this point there's huge numbers who are being forced out due to employers not adapting to respond to their needs. Recent surveys showed that nationwide over 400,000 people just last year were pushed out due to disability. The East Midlands won't have curbed that trend.
So you don't think the figures are really what they say they are? And you heard Mark Harper there saying that they're going to narrow this employment gap for disabled people. Can you really see that gap being closed?
I think we're certainly an uphill struggle. I think recent surveys show huge numbers responding. For example, 3/4 of disabled people say that when they go to have job interviews, that at least once in their career they've found employers responding in a prejudiced way towards them, viewing them in a more negative way than non-disabled prospective colleagues. And also, even when you're in employment, that doesn't mean that the prejudice stops. The disabled pay gap is actually increasing under this government. Since 2010, it's widened by a third.
Well, Frances, there, Nigel, saying that it is an uphill struggle and that she's not quite sure what the reality of these figures are, and neither, to be honest, did Emily in our film as we saw working in that Mencap cafe. She says she's not really seeing hard evidence of all these extra people getting these jobs with disabilities, and she works for Mencap.
No, I mean, I guess that is a bit worrying, but I mean, I think we have to be quite celebrating that those numbers are a positive trend. I think we all want to see...
But are the figures real?
Well, I mean, they're the official figures, aren't they? So I guess we have to assume that they're real, and they probably do show some progress. I sit on the Work and Pension Select Committee, and we're doing an inquiry into access to work as we speak, and we've been looking at how we can give people more help and give more people more help just to try and get that first hurdle cleared so you actually get into work and stay into work. And I think there are lessons out there for how we actually get those sort of schemes better known so people actually know there is money out there to take on
that may be one of the
people.
problems, because we spoke to Mencap and Remploy, which is a government body, about the Disability Confident campaign, which started a year ago, and to be honest, they hardly knew anything about it.
Yeah, that's
so
quite
they
disappointing,
don't know about
it? Certainly I'm aware of this, of those campaigns. I think we're all quite keen, especially to get around to smaller employers and say how useful a disabled employee can be. Actually, that can be a really positive step to take on somebody in that situation. So, I think there's lots of work to do, but actually going in the right direction.
John, the government say that they're putting an awful lot of effort into this.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Nigel, I've got no reason to doubt those figures if they're the official figures. I mean, I think we need to look at all of the policy disabled people into work policies in the round. I mean, when you look at the work programme, I saw a set of figures today which suggested that the work programme hasn't got a very good record at all at helping disabled people move into employment. So I think we need a sort of review across all these matters, but there's other issues as well when it comes to public policy which affect disabled people. You've got to look at the bedroom tax. A lot of disabled people are hit by the bedroom tax and have actually gone into rent arrears because they can't afford to pay the bedroom tax. And also, when I've been speaking to disabled charity groups in my own Leicester constituency, they tell me that anecdotally they're picking up an increase in disability hate crime into society more generally. And I think that's something else politicians have got to look at.
Are any of the political parties getting any of this right, Frances?
I think that point is really valid. You can't talk about disability and employment without looking at the wider picture for disabled people. And I think right now we are in a particular negative climate for disabled people. I think the past 4 years of this government has been one of the worst for living disabled people. I talk to people in their 50s and 60s who can't remember a time when they felt more isolated, deeper in poverty, or more frightened of the future. And I think we need to look at, of course, employment measures, but it's much more the wider picture.
It's worrying, Nigel, isn't it, that disabled people are feeling more isolated, and when you hear that people like Lord Freud, who recently at a party conference said that there should be a £2 an hour wage for disabled people, I mean that patronised an awful lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to go through that issue and what he was trying to say. But I mean, I think he's right that we incentive.
It's not the right way to go about it, though,
no,
is it?
And he apologised for the words he used on that occasion. I think the issue he was talking about was one that is important. how do we encourage employers to take on disabled people? How do we help them if those employees need them, cost them more to get them set up? How do we help them if some of those employees aren't quite as productive as a fully able-bodied person? So I mean, I think that there is an issue there that is important that we talk about, not using the language he did. But I mean, I think we all want to be more positive about the role that people with disabilities of all kinds can actually play in our society. And I think there has been progress. We've reformed various benefits to try and give more help to people with the worst disabilities. And we're trying to go in the right direction here.
Francis, what would really help right now?
That question of benefits, I think, is incredibly important. The government has actually harmed the vast majority of people with the benefit system at present. They have pushed more money towards food disabled people, but at the expense of hundreds of thousands of others. Any approach to disability has to be the bigger picture.
Thanks very much indeed, Francis.